The slap echoed through the marble living room like a gunshot. "Pack your things. You're leaving. Now." Blessing's cheek burned as she stared at Mrs. Okafor, the woman who had just destroyed her world with 5 words. Her hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach, protecting the secret that had just been exposed. "Ma, please! I have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem." Mrs. Okafor's voice was ice cold. "You village girls are all the same. You're nothing but a house girl who forgot her place." The words hit harder than the slaps. Nothing but a house girl. "Security will escort you out in 1 hour," Mrs. Okafor continued. "Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. And if you ever try to contact this family again, you'll regret it." As Mrs. Okafor walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor, Blessing sank into the sofa she had polished that morning. 8 months ago, she had stepped off a bus at CMS with nothing but a paper bag and a dream of a better life. Now she was leaving with even less. But as she sat there, her hand on her stomach, something hardened inside her. A determination she didn't know she possessed. "You think I'm nothing?" she whispered to the empty room. "You think I'm just a village girl who forgot her place?" She stood up slowly, her spine straightening. "I'll show you what nothing can become." 8 months earlier, Blessing stepped off at CMS bus stop, her hands shaking as she clutched a worn paper bag containing her entire life. 2 faded dresses, a small Bible her mother had given her, and a crumpled piece of paper with an address in Victoria Island. She was 19 years old, fresh from a small village in Edo State, where her father farmed cassava and her mother sold vegetables in the local market. The family of 8 lived in a 2-room mud house with no electricity. Pastor Adebayo had called her father 3 weeks ago with news of a job in Lagos. Chief Okafor needed a house girl. The pay was 25,000 naira monthly, more money than their entire family made in 6 months. Now, standing in the chaos of Lagos traffic, Blessing felt overwhelmed. The city was loud, fast, and scary. Cars honked constantly, people shouted, and the smell of exhaust mixed with suya and fried plantain filled the air. She navigated the complex journey to Victoria Island, first a bus to CMS, then a boat across Lagos Lagoon. The boat ride was her first time on water, and she gripped the sides while praying silently. When she finally arrived at the address, she couldn't believe her eyes. The Okafor mansion stood like a white palace behind tall black gates. 2 security guards in crisp uniforms checked her letter of introduction before allowing her through. The compound was bigger than her entire village square. Perfectly manicured lawns, a sparkling swimming pool, and a fountain in the center. 3 cars were parked in the driveway, a black Mercedes, a white Range Rover, and a red sports car she'd only seen in movies. The main house was 3 stories tall with white pillars and floor-to-ceiling windows. As she walked toward the main entrance, her slippers felt inadequate against the marble pathway. Mrs. Okafor, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, opened the door and led her through the house. Inside, Blessing's jaw dropped. The living room had marble floors so shiny she could see her reflection. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a palace. The kitchen alone was bigger than her family's entire house, with gleaming appliances and countertops made of black granite. Mrs. Okafor explained the rules. Wake up at 5 a.m. every day, cook breakfast, clean the house, do the laundry, and prepare dinner. 1 day off per month. 25,000 naira salary. Blessing nodded eagerly. She would have agreed to anything. Her room was small, but felt like luxury. A single bed, a small wardrobe, and a window overlooking the back garden. Mrs. Okafor's final warning was clear. House girls come and go, but the ones who last are the ones who know their place. Blessing's first week was a blur of learning routines and trying not to break anything expensive. She quickly discovered the family dynamics. Chief Emeka Okafor was rarely home. He left early for his oil business and returned late, usually going straight to his study. When he did interact with her, it was only to grunt approval or shake his head in disapproval. Mrs. Okafor ran the household with military precision. She had rules for everything: how to fold towels, which cleaning products to use where, how to arrange flowers in the vases. She watched Blessing constantly, correcting her technique and reminding her that good housegirls were invisible. Aduni, the Okafor's 16-year-old daughter, was in boarding school but came home on weekends. She was beautiful and spoiled, leaving clothes everywhere and expecting Blessing to clean up after her without acknowledgement. But it was the oldest son who intrigued Blessing most. Daniel Okafor was 26 years old and looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Tall, well-built, with smooth, dark skin and an easy smile. He'd graduated from Harvard Business School and was being groomed to take over his father's empire. Unlike the rest of his family, Daniel noticed Blessing. He said good morning when he saw her, asked how she was settling in, and even helped her carry a heavy laundry basket one day. When she thanked him, he simply said to call him Daniel, since they weren't that different in age. But Blessing knew they were different in every way that mattered. It started innocently enough. Daniel would come to the kitchen for late-night snacks, and Blessing would be there cleaning up after dinner. He began asking about her background, where she was from, what it was like there. No one had ever shown such interest in her life before. She told him about the red earth roads, the cassava farms, the way everyone knew everyone else's business. He listened intently, asking follow-up questions. Their conversations became routine. Daniel would appear around 11 p.m., heat up food, and talk while she worked. He shared stories about Harvard, about America, about his dreams of modernizing his father's business with technology and environmental consciousness. When he asked about her dreams, she was caught off guard. No one had ever asked before. She admitted she wanted to go to school, maybe become a teacher to help village children who couldn't read. He praised her noble goal, saying education was the key to everything. These conversations became the highlight of Blessing's days. For 30 minutes each night, she felt like more than just a house girl. She felt like a person whose thoughts and dreams mattered. The connection between them grew stronger with each passing night. 2 months into the job, something shifted between them. The conversations grew more personal and intimate. Daniel would linger in the kitchen longer, finding excuses to extend their time together. One night, he told her she was different from other girls he knew. Most girls he met were only interested in his money or his family's status, but she actually cared about ideas and making a difference. When she downplayed herself as just a village girl, he insisted that her background didn't make her less than anyone else. The attraction was mutual and undeniable. One evening, while she was washing dishes, Daniel stood behind her and gently touched her shoulder. When she turned around, he was close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. He confessed he'd been thinking about her constantly. Despite her protests about their different worlds and her job, he kissed her softly. It was her first kiss, and it changed everything. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers and suggested they see where their feelings might lead, keeping it just between them. Their relationship blossomed in stolen moments. Quick kisses when passing in hallways, text messages sent from her room to his, longer conversations in the kitchen when the house was asleep. Daniel would share his frustrations with his father's old-fashioned business methods and his dreams of creating something bigger. She would tell stories about her village, her family, her hopes for the future. He spoke about modernizing everything when he took over the company and promised she would be part of that future. He wanted to help her go to school, get her education, build something together. These words filled her with hope. For the first time in her life, someone saw potential in her, believed she could be more than just a house girl. Their physical relationship progressed slowly. Daniel was patient, never pushing beyond her comfort zone. When they finally made love in her small room late one night, with moonlight streaming through her window, they whispered words of love to each other. She was 19 years old, and she believed love could conquer anything. 3 months into their relationship, Blessing realized she was late. The missed periods, followed by nausea and inability to keep food down, led her to buy a pregnancy test from a pharmacy in Mushin. When the 2 lines appeared, she sat on the bathroom floor and cried. She was terrified, but also strangely excited. She and Daniel talked about the future constantly. Surely this was just happening sooner than planned. That night, she waited until the house was quiet before going to the kitchen. When Daniel appeared at his usual time, she could barely speak from nervousness. She finally told him she was pregnant. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Daniel's face went through several emotions: shock, confusion, fear. After confirming she was certain, he sat down heavily and was quiet for a long time. Then came the devastating revelation. His father had been arranging a marriage for him to Chief Adebayo's daughter. The families had been discussing it for months. It was about business, connecting their companies. When she asked about their relationship and his promises, he insisted he'd meant everything he said. But marriage was different. It was about family, business, tradition. He offered to take care of her and the baby. He would find her a nice place to live, give her money monthly, ensure the baby wanted for nothing. When she realized he wanted her to be his secret, his side piece, he told her to be practical. They came from different worlds, and this was how these things worked. That night, Blessing lay in her small bed with her hand on her still flat stomach, realizing she had been living in a dream. The reality was harsh. She was a pregnant housegirl, and he was a chief's son who would marry within his class. Mrs. Okafor was not a stupid woman. After running a household for over 20 years, she knew how to read the signs. She noticed Daniel's frequent trips to the kitchen, saw how Blessing's face lit up when he entered a room, observed how they carefully avoided looking at each other when others were present. The morning sickness confirmed her suspicions. She watched Blessing rush to the bathroom during breakfast preparation, listened to her retching, and saw her pale face upon return. That evening, Mrs. Okafor called Blessing to the living room for a direct confrontation. Under pressure, Blessing admitted to the 3-month relationship and confirmed her pregnancy. Mrs. Okafor's slap came fast and hard. She accused Blessing of seducing her son and called her foolish for thinking this was love. A housegirl and a chief's son could never be together. When Blessing mentioned the baby, Mrs. Okafor declared it was her problem. Daniel was getting married in 6 weeks, to a proper girl from a proper family. The most crushing blow came when Mrs. Okafor revealed that Daniel was in Abuja on business and already knew about the situation. He had agreed with his mother's decision to handle it. The betrayal cut deeper than the slap. Daniel hadn't just abandoned her, he had sent his mother to do his dirty work. Within an hour, Blessing was standing outside the mansion gates with her paper bag and 3 months of unpaid salary. Mrs. Okafor had ensured she left with nothing more than she'd arrived with. Her attempts to call Daniel's phone went straight to voicemail. She tried repeatedly with the same result. She sat on the curb outside the mansion, watching the sun set over Lagos, and cried until she had no tears left. A security guard she'd been friendly with approached and offered help. His kindness in that moment meant everything. She accepted the 500 naira he offered for bus fare and made her way to the bus stop. The journey from Victoria Island to Mushin felt like traveling between 2 different worlds. The gleaming skyscrapers gave way to crowded streets, the clean roads became potholed, and the smell of money was replaced by the smell of struggle. When she knocked on her sister Kemi's door, she was pregnant with nowhere to go. Kemi lived in a Face Me, I Face You apartment building in Mushin. 1 room, shared bathroom, no kitchen. She worked as a seamstress, making about 40,000 naira monthly when business was good. Without hesitation, Kemi pulled her inside and listened to the whole story. When she learned the father was Chief Okafor's son, her eyes widened in disbelief. Kemi's assessment was harsh, but honest. Rich men don't love poor girls. They use them. She made space for her sister on the small mattress they would now share. The room was cramped, hot, and noisy. Outside, children played in the corridors, women argued over water, and men played loud music. It was a far cry from the marble floors and crystal chandeliers of the Okafor mansion. Kemi's simple declaration that family is family provided the only comfort in Blessing's new reality. That night, Blessing lay awake, listening to the sounds of the ghetto. Somewhere in Victoria Island, Daniel was probably sleeping comfortably, preparing for his wedding to a proper girl from a proper family. She placed her hand on her stomach and whispered a promise that it would just be them from now on. Baby Chioma was born on a rainy Tuesday morning at Mushin General Hospital after 18 hours of labor, with only Kemi by her side. The public hospital was crowded, understaffed, and chaotic. Women lay on stretchers in corridors, babies cried constantly, and the smell of disinfectant couldn't mask the underlying odor of suffering. When the doctor finally placed Chioma in her arms, Blessing felt a love so powerful it took her breath away. The baby was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and Daniel's exact nose and mouth. She named her Chioma, meaning God knows, because God knew their pain, their struggle, and their future. In that moment, holding her daughter in the chaos of a public hospital, Blessing made a life-changing decision. She would not raise her daughter in poverty. She would not let Kioma grow up feeling less than anyone else. She would build something from nothing, no matter what it took. She whispered a promise to her sleeping daughter about giving her everything she never had. When Kioma was 6 weeks old, Blessing started her first business with 15,000 naira from her savings and a determination that scared even her. She went to Alaba Market and bought provisions: soap, detergent, noodles, rice, canned goods. She carried them back to Mushin and set up a small table outside their building. Her first day's profit was 200 naira. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Every morning, she would wake at 4 a.m., feed Kioma, and set up her table. She would sell until evening, then count her profits and plan the next day's purchases. The other women in the building thought she was crazy, suggesting she find another rich man instead of killing herself with work. But Blessing was determined to take care of herself rather than depend on any man. Slowly, her profits grew. 200 naira became 500, then 1,000. She reinvested everything, buying more stock and expanding her offerings. Kioma slept in a cloth on her back while she worked, becoming the neighborhood mascot with everyone helping to watch her when Blessing was busy with customers. By Kioma's first birthday, Blessing had saved enough to rent a small shop in Mushin Market. It was just a wooden stall with a zinc roof, but it was hers. She expanded her stock to include clothes, shoes, and household items. She learned to negotiate with suppliers, read customer preferences, and manage inventory. More importantly, she learned to dream bigger. The business grew steadily. She hired her first employee, a young girl named Patience, who reminded her of herself. She taught Patience everything about customer service, stock management, and honest dealing. Kioma spent her days in the shop, playing with empty boxes and learning to count by watching her mother handle money. Even as a toddler, she showed signs of intelligence and curiosity. When customers asked why she didn't marry, Blessing would smile and say she was married to her business. When Kioma was 3, Blessing opened her second shop, then a third. By the time her daughter was 5, she had 6 shops across different markets in Lagos. She had also moved them to a 2-bedroom apartment in Surulere, a significant upgrade from the 1 room in Mushin. But Blessing's biggest breakthrough came when she started importing goods directly from China. She had saved enough to travel to Guangzhou, where she established relationships with manufacturers. The profit margins were incredible. Items that cost $2 in China could sell for 2,000 naira in Lagos. She was making more money than she had ever imagined possible. She registered her company as Blessing Enterprises and hired a small team to help manage the growing business. When Kioma asked if they were rich now, Blessing explained they were comfortable, but more importantly, they were free. Free to make their own choices, live their own lives, and help other people. By the time Kioma was 7, Blessing was a millionaire. By Kioma's 7th birthday, Blessing's company was worth over 2 billion naira. She had been featured in several business magazines, won awards for entrepreneurship, and was invited to speak at conferences. The girl who had been thrown out of a mansion for being pregnant was now one of Lagos's most successful young entrepreneurs. But success brought visibility, and visibility brought attention she wasn't sure she wanted. One morning, while reading This Day newspaper, she saw a familiar face in the business section. Daniel Okafor had been promoted to CEO of Okafor Oil. The article praised his Harvard education, his vision for modernizing the company, and his beautiful family. There was a photo of him with his wife and their twin sons. Blessing stared at the photo for a long time. Daniel looked older, more serious, but still handsome. His wife was light-skinned and elegant, exactly the type of woman his family would approve of. The article made no mention of other children. When Kioma asked who the man in the photo was, Blessing simply said, "Nobody important." But when pressed about why she was staring, she explained that sometimes we look at our past to remind ourselves how far we've come. Privately, she felt a stirring of something she had buried years ago. Not love, that was long dead, but a desire for recognition, acknowledgement, and justice. 3 years later, Blessing's empire had grown to include real estate, logistics, and manufacturing. Her company was worth 8 billion naira, and she was considered one of the most successful entrepreneurs in West Africa. She had just finished a board meeting in her Victoria Island office when her assistant knocked urgently with breaking news. The Okafor oil warehouse in Apapa was on fire. Through her business network, she knew Okafor Oil had been struggling financially. Their expansion into Ghana had failed, and they had significant debts. As she watched the news coverage, the fire was massive, with thick black smoke rising into the Lagos sky. Fire trucks surrounded the warehouse, but it was clearly too late. She instructed her assistant to gather everything about Okafor Oil's financial situation: insurance coverage, debt levels, cash flow. When asked if she was thinking of helping them, she replied she was thinking of buying them. By evening, Blessing had the full picture. The fire had destroyed 80% of their inventory, worth about 3 billion naira. Their insurance only covered 40% of the loss. They had outstanding loans of 2 billion naira and monthly operating costs of 200 million naira. Without immediate capital injection, they would be bankrupt within 3 months. As Blessing reviewed the numbers, she smiled. Sometimes the universe had a sense of humor. The next morning, Blessing instructed her assistant to call Okafor Oil requesting a meeting with CEO Daniel Okafor regarding a potential business partnership. When asked what company she was representing, the assistant said Blessing Enterprises. After a pause, the response came back excited. Mr. Okafor was very interested and could meet that afternoon. Blessing smiled as she hung up. Of course he was interested. Her company was now 3 times the size of his, and he desperately needed help. She spent the morning preparing meticulously. Her lawyers drew up acquisition documents, her accountants prepared financial projections, and her stylist selected the perfect outfit. This wasn't just a business meeting. This was the culmination of 10 years of building, growing, and becoming everything she had been told she could never be. At 1:30 p.m., she looked at herself in the mirror. Designer suit, expensive jewelry, confidence radiating from every pore. She looked like power. When 10-year-old Kioma complimented her appearance and asked if the meeting was important, Blessing confirmed it was very important. When asked if she was nervous, she replied she was ready. Blessing walked into the Okafor Oil boardroom at exactly 2 p.m. The room was full. The entire board of directors was present, indicating their desperation. She wore a navy blue Armani suit with pearl accessories, carried a leather briefcase, and exuded the confidence of someone who owned the room. Daniel looked up from his papers and froze. His face went completely white, as if he had seen a ghost. The recognition was instant and shocking. When he stammered her name, she responded professionally, thanking him for the meeting and stating she was there to discuss business. The other board members looked confused. When one asked if they knew each other, Blessing calmly explained they had history, but today was about business. Daniel's nervous suggestion to postpone the meeting was immediately questioned by other members who needed all the help they could get. That's when Blessing delivered her first blow. She calmly recited their financial situation: the 3 billion naira loss, the 2 billion in loans, the 200 million monthly bleeding. The room went silent. When Chief Okafor asked how she knew their financial situation, she explained she made it her business to know everything about companies she was interested in acquiring. The word acquiring sent shockwaves through the room. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Board members talked over each other, Daniel tried to get attention, and Chief Okafor demanded order. When quiet was restored, Blessing stood up, commanding the room's attention. She explained their company was in trouble, with the fire being just the final blow to an already struggling business. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, announcing she was prepared to offer 12 billion naira for 80% ownership of Okafor Oil. The room went silent again. Daniel's protest that she was just a house girl was met with her calm correction. She had been a house girl, but now she was the CEO of a company worth 15 billion naira. She distributed copies of her financial statements, her company's audited accounts, her personal net worth, and her acquisition proposal. Chief Okafor studied the documents, his eyes widening with each page. His amazement at the incredible numbers led him to ask how she had built such wealth. Her response was simple. She built it from nothing, while some people were relying on family money. When Daniel asked why she was targeting their company specifically, Blessing looked directly at him and delivered the truth that had been building for 10 years. Blessing's words cut through the room like a blade. 10 years ago, he had thrown her out of his house like garbage. He had told her she was nothing. He had said they were from different worlds. She wanted to show him that the house girl he discarded had just become his boss. The room erupted again, but this time with different energy. The board members were looking at Daniel with new understanding. Chief Okafor's slow question about whether she had worked in their house opened the floodgates. She confirmed she had been their house girl for 5 months, 10 years ago. She and Daniel had had a relationship, and when she became pregnant, his wife had thrown her out. The family drama unfolded as Chief Okafor confronted his son about getting their house girl pregnant and abandoning her. Daniel's attempts to explain were met with his father's disgust about having a child he'd never acknowledged. Daniel's defensive claim that he didn't know she would become successful was met with his father's question about whether that made his behavior acceptable. Blessing then revealed the existence of 10-year-old Kioma, Chief Okafor's granddaughter, who had never met her father. She had raised her alone while building the company that was about to buy theirs. After a long silence, Chief Okafor looked at his son with disgust, calling him a fool for throwing away such a woman for an arranged marriage. He expressed his exhaustion with Daniel's incompetence and failures. Turning to Blessing, he asked for her terms. She outlined them simply. 12 billion naira for 80% of the company. She becomes CEO. Daniel can stay as a regional manager if he wants. She would absorb the current debts as the cost of justice. When asked when she wanted to close, she said 2 weeks with one condition. She wanted to meet with all the staff so they would know exactly who their new boss was. 2 weeks later, Blessing walked into Okafor Oil as the new majority owner and CEO. The transaction had been completed that morning, making her the owner of her former employer's company. She had called an all-staff meeting for 10 a.m. The main conference room was packed with employees, from executives to cleaners. Blessing stood at the front of the room in a white power suit that made her look like an angel of justice. She introduced herself as their new CEO, and as murmurs rippled through the crowd, she acknowledged that some might remember her from 10 years ago when she used to clean the floors in that very building as the house girl who worked in the CEO's family home. The murmurs grew louder as she continued, explaining that today she owned the company, the building, and everything in it. She clarified that she wasn't there for revenge, but to build something great. They would modernize the company, expand across Africa, and dominate the market. But she emphasized an important lesson. Background doesn't determine future. Work ethic, vision, and determination do. She was proof that anyone could rise from anywhere with the willingness to work for it. The applause started slowly, then built to a crescendo as she announced their goal to make the company the biggest oil and gas company in West Africa. After the meeting, she walked through the building she now owned, stopping at the executive floor where Daniel's office used to be. He was packing his things, having been reassigned to manage their smallest regional office. In a brief, quiet conversation, she told him she didn't hate him, to which he replied he hated himself enough for both of them. When she said that meant he was finally growing up, she mentioned that their daughter wanted to meet him if he was interested. His eager acceptance was met with her condition that he would have to earn that privilege. That evening, Blessing sat in her new CEO office, looking out at the Lagos skyline, the same view she had dreamed of as a 19-year-old girl scrubbing floors. Kioma was with her, doing homework at the conference table. When asked if she was happy, Blessing distinguished between happiness and completeness. Happy is temporary, but complete is forever. When Kioma asked about forgiving her father, Blessing explained she already had. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to be free from anger. Regarding whether Daniel would be a good father, Blessing thought he would try, but emphasized that Kioma didn't need him to be complete. She was already perfect. As Kioma returned to her homework, Blessing scrolled through news coverage of the acquisition. The headlines were unanimous. From house girl to CEO, the Blessing miracle. But she knew it wasn't a miracle. It was justice. It was the universe correcting itself. It was proof that no one could define your worth except yourself. She began typing her first company-wide email as CEO, starting with, "To all Blessing Oil and Gas employees," and continuing with, "Today, we begin a new chapter. Not just for this company, but for what's possible when we refuse to accept limitations." Outside her window, Lagos glittered like a promise. For the first time in 10 years, Blessing felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The house girl had become the boss. The discarded had become the decision-maker. The nothing had become everything. And it was just the beginning. If this story connected with you and you'd love more, type "continue" in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, and share with someone who needs to feel something deeper than the usual. And if this is your first time here, subscribe and join a community where stories do more than entertain. They awaken something inside us. Thank you so much. I love you.